Everyone, I see the chat populating. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. We are live now, however, we're just going to get started right away. If you are already logged in and you can hear me, and you have friends who are having trouble logging in, you can let them know that they can navigate over to YouTube. On our YouTube channel, which is, if you just navigate over to YouTube and type in Congressman Scott Peters, you'll be able to see the live stream on YouTube. And I'm going to wait a couple more minutes as people are logging in, and then we'll get started. Thanks for joining us. Hi, everyone, and welcome. We're going to get started in just 1 minute. If you or anyone else that you know is trying to log in and having a hard time logging into the Zoom for the webinar, you can also navigate over to our YouTube channel. If you navigate to YouTube and Google Congressman Scott Peters, you can also watch it live there. And then once we have the recording complete, we will post it on our Facebook page so people can watch it after the fact. But for now, we are going to go ahead and get started. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. My name is Mary Ann Pintar. I'm Congressman Scott Peters' Chief of Staff, and I'll be moderating tonight. Thank you for joining us for a virtual town hall with Congressman Scott Peters, who now represents California's 50th Congressional District. This new district encompasses the city of Coronado, coastal San Diego, all of San Marcos, Rancho Santa Fe, Fairbanks Ranch, and a southern portion of the city of Escondido. I've mentioned this a couple times already, but if you're having problems logging into the Zoom, you can navigate over to the YouTube page and Google Congressman Scott Peters and find the live stream there. When we get started tonight, Congressman Peters will tell you a little bit about some of his priorities for 2023 and for this 118th session of Congress. And then we'll be taking some questions or answering some questions, some that were submitted in advance, as well as some from the chat box from those of you that are here live with us tonight. If you have a question about a specific problem or challenge you're having with a federal agency, such as a Social Security benefit or a VA benefit, for example, the best way to get answers to those types of questions is to reach out to our office at 858-455-5550 or navigate to our website at scottpeters.house.gov/help. We have experienced staff assigned to help you resolve these kinds of problems, and they would be happy to help you, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. And now I will turn it over to Congressman Scott Peters for some opening remarks. Scott?
Thanks, Marianne, and thanks to everyone for joining us. Excuse me, I'm Scott Peters. It's an honor to represent the 50th District in California in the United States House of Representatives, and it's nice to join people in this virtual town hall from new areas that I represent. Some background for those of you who are new to my district and may not know me. I was first elected to the House in 2012. I currently serve on the Energy and Commerce Committee, as well as the Budget Committee. Prior to my service in Congress, I was an environmental lawyer for about 15 years. I joined the San Diego City Council, became the City Council President. After that, I served as a Port Commissioner and was the Port Commission Chairman for a while. Today, I would like to hear from you and share some of my priorities for this year. If you're watching Congress, you saw that we had a delayed and chaotic start. It was clear, however, that Democrats are united to work for the American people. In 2023, we will continue implementing provisions from the landmark laws we passed in the last Congress, like the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act, the bipartisan infrastructure bill. These new laws help lower prescription drug prices. They'll set forth new guidelines to build our clean energy capacity and help rebuild our infrastructure, which will make us provide more opportunities for our children and jobs and make us more competitive with countries around the world. Many of you people asked ahead of time about my plans for legislation related to climate change and the environment, and also some questions about cross-border sewage. So let me address those up front. The progress we need to make following the Inflation Reduction Act really depends on our ability to build projects and infrastructure much quicker than we currently do. People are used to things going slow in the United States, but my priority will be to help us reach true energy security. And to do that, we need to transition to clean, renewable technologies and be less reliant on fossil fuels like oil and gas. And to transition faster, we have to look at the environmental laws on the books, many of which were established in the 1970s when climate change wasn't the challenge, it was stopping bad projects. Now we need to figure out ways to agree on high-level environmental projects, protections and standards without taking so much time to review each project before it's approved. So those of us who say that climate change is the greatest threat we face, I'm one of them, we have to rethink the requirements that slow down the pace of clean energy projects. I'm also going to pursue a path forward on my bill, the Save Our Sequoias Act, to protect these iconic trees from extreme fire. And which, by the way, we've lost 20% of sequoias to fire after 750 years of them not being threatened. So we've got to change the way we are managing the forest around those trees. And also introduce new legislation to protect communities from toxic wildfire smoke, another thing that San Diegans have experienced. Finally, I remain committed to investing in technology to help us remove carbon from the atmosphere. So reducing greenhouse gas emissions is a vital part of the solution, but we also have to focus, according to the international experts at the United Nations, on removing the emissions already in the atmosphere. So I'm going to continue to support federal investments to develop the tools we need to accomplish this, carbon capture and carbon capture sequestration. All right, so there's a lot of attention on the Tijuana River Valley. I know it's been in the news just recently with another pipe break in Mexico. And transboundary pollution has been an issue that our entire delegation has worked together on with our senators and with both presidents. This problem has been hurting the South Bay communities for decades. My community that I represent is Coronado. Juan Vargas represents Imperial Beach. Look, we made progress in 2020. Working together, our delegation was able to secure $300 million as part of the US-Mexico-Canada trade agreement, USMCA. We've got another $150 million that we've also appropriated to the Border Water Infrastructure Program. So we've got real money to get these projects done. And let me give you a short update on where the things stand today. In July, we had two binational agreements signed by the United States and Mexico, federal agencies to reduce transboundary wastewater in the Tijuana River watershed through several infrastructure projects. The agreements outline sanitation projects to be constructed in San Diego and Tijuana using $330 million from the US government and $144 million from the Mexican government. It's very important that Mexico has stepped up and put real money on the table enforceable by a treaty. These projects are expected to be completed and operational by the end of 2027. And they would reduce the number of days of transboundary transboundary wastewater flow in the Tijuana River in half, and reduce the volume of untreated wastewater that's being discharged to the Pacific by 80%. Construction of the expanded South Bay International Wastewater Treatment is expected to start in 2024. Design and procurement is currently underway. We'll complete it later this year. Mexico has been working on 14 short-term projects to improve their wastewater treatment system. The total cost of these projects is $120 million, with $20 million coming from the International Border Water Infrastructure Program that I mentioned. Earlier this month, Mexican repair crews caused an accidental breakage in a Tijuana pipeline. That's what you've been seeing. The U.S. section of the International Boundary Water Commission provided technical and material assistance to contain the transboundary flows through the canyons. Flows through Goats Canyon and Smuggler's Gulch stopped a week ago. Look, we're extremely frustrated. I'm frustrated about the damage this problem causes to our communities on both sides of the border. Our Navy SEALs train in this water. We recreate in this water. We define ourselves as San Diegans by our relationship to the ocean. So we're working on the long-term solutions to put this problem to rest. And also we're working on short-term solutions to see what we can do to make sure that we don't suffer the contaminated summers like we've seen. But to solve the problem of this magnitude, it takes time, effort, and money and good faith on behalf of two separate countries. I have to say that I'm glad these projects are well underway, and I can't overstate the importance of Mexico coming to the table with real money for the first time. I think that's going to really help. So a lot of the issues are on their side. So Marianne, that's enough of me chatting about this. Let's go to some questions, see what people want to hear about.
Thank you, Scott. We're going to start out with a couple of questions that people submitted in advance. We had a lot of people, including Lisa and Ron from San Diego, who wanted to know what you are doing, what Congress is doing to protect Social Security and Medicare. Let's start there. It's a topic that's been in the news a lot lately, and several people wrote into us about it. So let's go there, and then I'm going to go to some folks that have their hands raised in the chat.
Okay, great. Well, look, Social Security and Medicare, some people call them entitlements, but they're really bargains that the United States has made with seniors. They paid in over the course of their whole life. These programs are vital to ensuring financial security, access to health care for San Diego seniors. And we need to make sure that these programs remain sustainable and continue to meet the changing demands of the beneficiaries. Now, last year, you may have noticed Senator Rick Scott from Florida had the idea of sunsetting major federal programs, all major federal programs, including Social Security and Medicare, every 5 years, which would literally eliminate those programs every 5 years, and we would hope that they would get started again, but doesn't provide any kind of long-term security. Senator Scott has now retracted that part of his plan, but there is a problem we have to deal with, that some of the trust funds financing those benefits will be depleted in the next 5 to 10 years if we do nothing. In that case, when in 10 years, for instance, when Social Security's revenues in are exceeded by their payments out, under the law currently as it is, beneficiaries face an automatic 20% across the board cut. That's not acceptable. So doing nothing is not an option either. If we want to alleviate the long-term financial burdens on Social Security and Medicare, we're going to need to find ways to responsibly raise more revenue. Now, on Social Security, we could permanently fund increases to the benefit level for all current and new beneficiaries. We could improve the cost of living adjustment formula, give beneficiaries tax relief, increase the minimum benefit for lifetime low-income earners by including annual income that exceeds the current threshold in payroll tax assessment. And for Medicare, we could do more to incentivize better care delivery, support medical innovation, reform the nation's immigration pathways, which would help pay more money in from the workforce. All of these would give Medicare's trust funds more solvency in the short run. I certainly don't like the idea of eliminating these programs. That's not the answer. The answer is to protect them, to maintain benefits, and figure out smarter ways to finance it. And I would be happy to be part of finding that solution with my colleagues and with the president. Mary Ann?
Thank you, Scott. I just am navigating back to the questions here.
Okay.
A lot of questions about drug pricing and drug pricing reform. In particular, Ron from San Diego is asking about how you voted on drug pricing reform and allowing Medicare to negotiate drug pricing. Do you want to tackle that one? And then we're going to go to Don Wood from San Diego.
Well, thank you for that question. I'm really proud of the product that not only did I vote for, but I helped write. I negotiated and passed as part of the Inflation Reduction Act provisions to ensure that Medicare beneficiaries can afford their medications. Every Democrat voted for it. It was a hard, you may be recalling that there were some. It was difficult to get to that answer. We had to get something that the Senate would pass that would preserve incentives for continued private investment and that would provide relief for seniors, and that's what we did. So now patient costs for insulin on Medicare are capped at $35. Patients' out-of-pocket expenses are capped at $2,000 a year. Drug companies are prohibited from raising their prices faster than inflation. And for the first time, Medicare is empowered to negotiate drug prices when markets have failed to produce competition and bring prices down. So effective January this year already, that $35 cap for insulin is in effect, and drug companies can't raise their price by more than the rate of inflation. And in September of this year, Medicare will announce the first 10 drugs they'll negotiate with manufacturers on. They're going to pick the most expensive ones for the government. And once a price is decided, those prices will go into effect in 2026. And in 2025, Medicare beneficiaries' out-of-pocket expenses will be capped at $2,000. I'm really proud of that work. It would have been, it's often the way in Congress that you just yell at other people about preventing something from happening, and blame is the language of losing. This is something that everyone's proud of, and Democrats ran on, and I think it's really going to help seniors and the country. By the way, I didn't mention this negotiation that we passed will save the federal government $300 billion over 10 years, so it's good for the budget as well. Mary Ann?
Scott. Yep. Daniela, can you let Don Wood ask a question? He's at the top of the list of people who would like to ask a question, and then we'll go to the next person.
Scott, I have two questions. The first one is, do you really believe that increasing the amount of market rate housing in San Diego will bring down average housing prices within the next couple of years? And if so, if not, why did you align yourself with the housing developers and the YIMBYs? My second question is, what specific legislation do you have in mind for the redevelopment of the Navwar site? Thank you.
Great questions, Don. First, absolutely, housing is a supply and a demand issue. Just looking at a book, I can't remember the author, homelessness is a housing issue. And evidence from Seattle and New York and other places is that a large part of bringing the cost down is to increase supply. So I really don't think there's a question about that. I think, by the way, that set-asides and incentives for affordable housing as part of that is really important. But I think we should be we should know, we should be aware that building more housing everywhere will bring the price down and give our, laborers and our teachers and firefighters and other working people a chance at living here, which I think is good. So why did I line myself with YIMBYs? Because housing costs are probably the biggest barrier to the state's economic growth and the continued prosperity of San Diego and California. 65% of Californians are cost burdened. They pay more than 30% of their income on rent or mortgage. And the challenge confronts far too many of our constituents. And the way we get out of that is we build more housing. And we have to build at least 13,000 units a year to meet the city's housing goals. And now I think over 8,000 San Diegans are experiencing homelessness. 8% of unsheltered individuals are veterans. The way we deal with that, and this is what the research shows, is you build more housing. And I support set-asides and I support the low-income housing tax credit at the federal level to encourage more rent-restricted housing. We've supported the Veterans House Act to increase the number of veterans who are eligible for VASH vouchers, which provide support for veterans. I've expanded that to other than honorable discharges through legislation that I authored and passed. But yes, housing everywhere at every level is important. I think the state is also taking on the idea of the missing middle class housing. We can talk about more housing issues, but on the NAVWAR issue. So this is for folks who may not be familiar with it, this is the bomber factories you see along Highway 5, west of Highway 5 as you're driving to downtown. Those really wide white buildings. In World War II, they produced a bomber an hour, really very impressive production. But they're really not designed for what they're being used for, which is the NAVWAR, which is one of the brain centers of the Navy. They need an office building. They need a new office building. They should get one. This is a facility we want to stay in San Diego. We don't want them to move someplace else. It's a great intersection of technology and the military. I think it belongs here. Right now, that property is underused. The Navy doesn't work for me, but I think they should redevelop it. I think that there's better uses for that property than, really, I think it's kind of dumpy and we could do better. So I will be following it very closely. They put out a request for information on what interest there is in development. Again, I expect that housing will be a big part of it. I think that's what we need. And I think it can look a lot better from the street or from the view across the highway than what's there now. And I hope that they come up with something good. But I was just having a conversation about it today. I'm following it very closely, and we'll really work to make sure that it's a credit to San Diego as well as what the Navy needs.
And Scott, just a reminder, you also led a letter for with the delegation that signed on, reminding you,
Right. Oh, yeah.
encouraging. Just if you want to talk a little bit about that letter.
Thank you. So thanks, Don. My request to the Navy is, by the way, that they include military housing. So it's right next to MCRD. It would be a great place to set aside some housing, like we did in when we redeveloped Liberty Station, the Naval Training Center. That would be a really appropriate place for rent-restricted, effectively affordable housing for enlisted military to live. And I think that's what I hope that they will include as part of the project.
Thank you, Scott. Next, we're going to go to Sandra Wetzel-Smith. Sandra, you are there? And I think Danielle is going to unmute you so you can ask your question.
Can you hear me?
We can,
Yes.
Sandra.
Okay. Well,
Hey, Sandra,
Scott, you
how are
know
you?
that I was redistricted out of your district and I miss it entirely, but I did want you to know how proud I was to have had you as a congressman for a very long time. And
Thank you.
I am simply hoping that we can find out more. I'm really interested in the Tijuana solution for this sewer. And I was wondering, what is your top priority for the things that we can get done between now and the end of the next year and a half to maybe encourage people to work together to come up with solutions rather than just continue the fighting across the aisle stuff?
Well, thanks, Sandy. First of all, thank you. You've taught me a lot about wildfires because of what happened to Scripps Ranch, and the
Yeah.
Scripps Ranch really sets an example for how communities can lead. Just one thing more on the Tijuana River Valley. I think there's an issue where people really are working together. We've had, good luck. Most of our congressional delegation, both of our senators are Democrats, but Darrell Issa has been very helpful on this as well. President Trump's EPA was helpful on this, as is President Biden's EPA. Once we got the money, they're interested in doing the work. And I think, as difficult as it is to wait, we want a final solution. We've got enough money to pursue that kind of final solution. So, 5 years, 10 years from now, we're not dealing with the same issue that we've been dealing with really in a really terrible way since particularly 2017. Look, I got to tell you, I sat through 15 votes for the speaker. It was kind of excruciating to see how that went down. I mean, one thing about Nancy Pelosi is, you could love her or hate her, but she could count her votes. And, she never had more than one vote. I think that Speaker McCarthy has got about 20 people who may not be that interested in whether the place works. And I say this, I'm trying not to be partisan because, clearly some people are like that. I'm probably on both sides of the aisle, but that's a lot of folks when you only have a 5-person margin. And I think for my part, I think what you do in this kind of context and divided government is the more normal situation is you look for people from the other party that you can agree on issue by issue. So just the two examples that I would give you is I got to be friends with Jody Arrington, who's a super conservative member from Lubbock, Texas. He and I are looking at debt and deficit issues, like how can we get the country on a more fiscally sustainable path. We'll work together on that. And, it's hard to find agreement, but at least we're having good discussions. The other person I've become friendly with is Bruce Westerman, who's now the chair of the Natural Resources Committee. Bruce is a Arkansan, I guess, who got a graduate degree from the Yale School of Forestry. He knows more about forestry than anybody in Congress, and he's helping me save the sequoias because we got to figure out how we do things differently to make sure that we save those iconic trees. And Bruce is the one who knows the answers and has helped me craft the bill. So we'll find those kinds of solutions that we can. It'll be hard to do. We're not going to be able to do something like like we did in the last Congress, a one-party climate investment of $360 billion. That won't happen. But even if Democrats were in control, most of what we would be doing on that front in this Congress is making sure that the money's deployed right. So again, we'll do oversight. We'll work with the administration to make sure that happens and try to work together as much as we can. Try to put politics aside, at least in my view. I try to put politics aside until late next year and try to let the work speak for itself. And that's been my approach. And, I think most people in Congress come to try to solve problems. The ones you hear about are the ones who are interested in publicity, but that's not most of us.
Thank you, Scott. We're going to take another question from the chat box, and then I'm going to go to another question or two that we received in advance. Daniela, can you please unmute Samir Nuhali? I hope I pronounced it correctly. Samir, you are unmuted. Can you hear us? Samir, are you there? Okay, I'm going to go to a question that we received in advance then.
Okay.
Are you there? Samir? All right, why don't you go ahead and mute Samir again, Daniela, and we'll come back. Hopefully they will be able to join us again. Several people wrote in advance when they registered for the town hall regarding immigration and border security. Tom, David, Thomas, several people from San Diego, La Jolla, and Coronado asked about our border security and border crossings that have, they believe have increased. Your outlook on comprehensive immigration reform, if you think there is hope in this Congress to make any progress. And others are concerned about the backlog at USCIS. Which of those would you like to tackle first, Scott?
Marion, I'll take a shot at it. If I forget something, you can come at me again. Remind me. Look, immigration reform is one of the most glaring examples of dysfunction because Republicans and the Democrats agree that the system's broken, but we haven't come together to negotiate a bipartisan solution. We've been very close. We actually had a deal under President Obama that got a lot of votes in the Senate, more than enough, but Speaker Boehner would let us vote on it. Today, we're facing worker shortages in many sectors throughout the economy. Immigration is always where we turn for farm workers, for home health care, for hospitals, for manufacturing. We need people in science and engineering and technology. We want that talent here. Immigration is a natural approach, and I think we should probably be legalizing more immigration at the same time that we deal with security issues as they come up. My priorities will be protecting dreamers who are already here, part of the economy, all the people who are already part of the economy here, 11 million people or so. We can't send them back practically. We want to reduce the visa backlog. We want faster processing. We want to expand refugee settlement. I'm working to protect those who served with us in Afghanistan as interpreters and so forth with an Afghan Adjustment Act. At the same time, we're preparing for the end of Title 42. Title 42 was a COVID rule, which allows border officials to turn most migrants away because of COVID. Obviously, we're coming out of that, or we've come out of COVID. Now there will be new procedures to incentivize migrants to schedule their arrival at the border in advance, to limit irregular migration, set up process for asylum claims. By the way, asylum claims are legal immigrants. International law protects asylum seekers and entitles them to get a hearing. President Biden has created programs for Ukrainians, Afghans, Haitians, Cubans, I think Venezuelans, migrants from other countries experiencing war and instability, and allowing them to sort of make their requests from afar. There's been a 97% drop in migrants arriving at the southern borders from the countries included in those programs. It's a significant step, but it's only temporary. The Biden administration is working within the laws that were written decades ago. We need to update those laws to assure that asylum seekers get a quick, fair hearing. Look, there's nothing that prevents us from making that decision as asylum seekers come, rather than admitting them to the country and then having to kick the 85% of the people who don't get asylum back out of the country. It would be better for everyone. It's better for them to be allowed to apply remotely. I think that's good. But it's it's something that we should be able to come together on. I think we'll continue to look for bipartisan solutions on it. Unfortunately, I think that it's become such a political football. I would just say about the border. The border is a very important part of our economy in San Diego. I think San Diego business recognizes this. When I was first elected to Congress, I met with Jerry Sanders, who was by then the chair of the regional chamber. I said, what's the number one concern of the business community that the federal government could address? And he said, border wait times. We were losing tens of billions of dollars, or billions of dollars, and tens of thousands of jobs because of delays. The delegation came together in a bipartisan way and built the very modern San Ysidro border crossing. And we need to keep that staffed up now. That's another issue. That's the issue now with border crossings. We have 20 some gates, but not all of them are staffed, and that's sort of our challenge right now. But we've got great infrastructure. Anyway, I'm supportive of bipartisan efforts to enhance legal status for dreamers, TPS, farm workers, and high skilled workers. I think some of those bills have a shot in a bipartisan way. It's hard to see comprehensive immigration reform with given the fear that the reluctance that most Republicans seem to greet it with. Part of that's because they're just not near the border, they don't understand it, but I think that's the reality right now. Did that answer the questions, Marianne?
I think you did, Scott.
Okay.
I was going to Tom Leddington. Is he still on the online here, Daniela? He was in the chat. He put his hand down. Okay. All right. Going back to Samir Nuhali, are you there, Samir?
Muted.
You there? Can you hear us, Samir? Okay. We'll go to somebody else. How about Howard Tenenbaum? Daniela, can you see Howard Tenenbaum in the chat, and can you bring him over and unmute him? Are you able to do that? Okay. While we're waiting for that, we'll go to another question that we received in advance. We received questions from Mary Catherine and Brian and others from San Diego who are asking about homelessness and housing costs. They would like to know what the federal government is doing and what you are doing specifically to try and tackle this problem.
Sure. I talked a little bit about housing before. Housing is largely something that's authorized by the city. One federal program I mentioned was the low-income housing tax credit. We can give builders a credit to be able to build affordable housing that the market won't produce on its own. That's an important federal program that I've supported. The other place where we weigh in is with what's called Section 8 vouchers to help people with their rent who are in poverty, and with veterans. We have the Veterans Veterans Assistance Board of Housing bill vouchers that provide support with supportive housing for veterans who need it. The Trump administration, as she tried to end that program, we were able to fight back. I was part of the Veterans Committee to keep that program going and to expand it. We've also authorized those vouchers for veterans who have received other than honorable discharges, not dishonorable discharges, but people who've been discharged for administrative reasons and not for wrongdoing. That's 3% of the veterans population, but 15% of the homeless veterans population. We will continue to try to support housing for San Diegans. A couple other things that I've done. We introduced the Fair Housing Improvement Act. So in San Diego, to its credit, the city has passed a law that prohibits landlords from refusing a rental unit to someone who receives federal housing assistance. We want to implement that policy nationwide and ban source of income discrimination to make sure that people who have a federal housing voucher can actually use it. I've fought to increase funding for the youth homelessness demonstration program to fund programs with active youth participation and end youth homelessness. And also I've introduced something in the last Congress called the Build More Housing Near Transit Act. We just completed the extension of the Mid-Coast transit line, which will be a great project. It's coming back from COVID. I think it's going to get a lot of ridership. It connects the business center by UTC and UCSD, downtown East County and the border. But we didn't really, we weren't really asked when at a local level we were planning it, what are you going to put next to the transit station? So in other words, if you put housing right next to those stations, people would be able to walk to it. They might not need a second car. They might not need any car. They could rely on that housing, and it would encourage ridership, which would both help fare box recovery for those who are concerned taxpayers, and it would help get people out of their cars for those who are concerned about climate. So now Build More Housing Near Transit would make every locality competing for money for projects like that. And we got $1 billion in our county from the federal government to match our $1 billion that we put up. If you want to be part of that competition, you have to show the federal government what you're going to build next to it to ensure that there's ridership and we're not building trains to nowhere. To the credit of the locals here, they're trying to build housing near the transit that we just built. UCSD has built great stations there that are going to make them really user friendly. But I think that should be upfront, and we should leverage federal transportation dollars to make sure that we're getting the biggest bang for our buck and the most cars off the road.
Scott, we're going to go to a question from the one of our participants tonight, Thomas Baker. Daniela, can you bring Thomas Baker over and unmute him, please?
Hi.
Hi, Thomas.
How are you guys? Thanks for holding this. And I want to turn our attention a little bit farther abroad right now. I support everything that's been said about the local issues and Social Security and Medicare. But I have to say, and I taught European history at university level for many years, and I'm very concerned now with what I see going on with these tensions rising. I mean, obviously, Russia invaded Ukraine, and that's not really tolerable. And we have big beefs with China over some islands that are close to their shores, but not necessarily part of them. But, these are nuclear powers. And I'm a little afraid that we are getting a little ahead of ourselves here. I just see, and I don't see it talked about very much, but I'm really concerned now. And I think Congress hasn't been doing the job it should in sort of reviewing and thinking about alternative ways to manage these tensions so that they don't get out of hand. So I'm just curious what you're thinking about that now, and if you share these concerns.
I share the concerns. I think we're in a tough spot, Thomas. I think, we didn't bring this war. I mean, I think Marjorie Taylor Greene called this Biden's war. It's not Biden's war, it's Putin's war.
Yeah.
And, Putin started this.
Yep.
And, I think that it's a dangerous situation not to do something too. I mean, there's risks with not doing something. And what I think is notable about this is that the Ukrainians are fighting this fight. We're not putting our people in the line of fire, and they're doing it valiantly, and they're doing it as an example of democracy around the world. It sends a message to the rest of the world that we're serious about defending democracy and about our reliability as an ally and as an opponent. It sends a message to China when they think about Taiwan. The Ukrainian people are not just fighting anymore; they're really fighting for their democracy, and that's what the United States is about. I would say too, there's been some success out of this. Germany has decided to increase its defense capabilities, take care of itself. 2 countries have asked to join NATO. He wanted to weaken NATO. NATO's getting stronger. And the continent is now figuring out ways to divorce itself from Russian energy. And so I think there's been some success out of this. Clearly, it's not over. It has the potential to go on for a while. But to me, we have a large defense budget, part of which in concept is dedicated to protecting ourselves from Russia. And the Ukrainians have done a great job of that almost on our behalf. So I've supported it so far. I will tell you that we get regular briefings about this, that we, most of them are confidential. I think that, it's very hard to know what Putin is thinking, but he's not getting stronger. And I think we're also very, very aware of the nuclear threat. And I don't think it's not free from doubt. It's not free from risk. It's hard to be a superpower, but I'm supportive of standing with Ukraine in support of its democracy. It kind of inspires me, and I think it sends the rest of the world a message that freedom is worth fighting for.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you, Thomas, for the really important question. I'm going to go to a question that we received from a couple people, from William in San Diego and Laurel in Coronado. They are both asking about the status of Afghan refugees, particularly those that helped us in the war in Afghanistan. I think they're referring to the SIV holders in particular. How do we overcome opposition to longer term status for the Afghans that helped us in Afghanistan so they can stay here? And Laurel said in particular, she's very concerned about the uncertainty that they face.
I agree. I'm with Laurel. So, you could have an argument about whether we should have kept a presence in Afghanistan after investing so much. I think it was a mistake to go in the first place, but we broke it and maybe we bought it. But both President Trump and President Biden wanted to get out completely. And you could certainly observe, and I think it's true, that we could have done a better job of getting out. I mean, I think that I hope that some lessons were learned from that. But what you can't argue about is that there were people like Ramat, my guest at the State of the Union, who joined our military forces. Ramat was with the Marines in one of the most dangerous parts of the war, risking his own life as an Afghan to help our service members. And they are absolutely torn up. These veterans are torn up that their brothers in arms would be in this situation, not knowing if they can stay in the United States, if they can get their families out. It's really not acceptable. In every other conflict, or most other conflicts, including Vietnam, we would do an adjustment act. And I'm a original co-sponsor of the Afghan Adjustment Act, so that these people can come here and work and have a path to a green card and work here. These people who are who've laid their lives on the line for us. The issue has been, I think it's misplaced, whether they're vetted or not. Well, on one hand, like if you're willing to risk your own life for our service members, that's a pretty good vetting right there. I don't know what kind of admission tests you want to administer beyond that, but I will tell you that before you can join the Marines as an interpreter, Afghan interpreter, you have to be vetted. Before you can leave Afghanistan, you have to be vetted. Once you're here, before you get any kind of status, they check in on you every month. And our bill that would allow you to go beyond humanitarian parole and have permanent legal status would vet you again. So the level of vetting is very, very high. I don't want to, suggest that there's, I don't know. I mean, I think that the notion that these people are not vetted is just a BS argument. And it's consistent with, well, I don't want to say. Anyway, I just think it's a BS argument. We should stand behind the people who stood with us. And again, it's a matter of our credibility as United States. If we say we're going to take care of you if you fight with us, and then we don't take care of you, that really undermines our credibility and our security. It's a national security issue. So we should take care of these people. I want to congratulate the Afghan evac project led by a San Diegan named Sean Van Diver. The Truman Project has been really helpful with this. There's a lot of veterans, post 9/11 veterans, for whom this is personal. We have a lot of them in San Diego, and I will keep trying to do the right thing by our Afghan allies.
And Scott, I'm not sure if you said it, if I missed it, because I was looking at the chat for our next question, that this is not new. An adjustment act like this is not new. You did. Sorry about that.
We did it after Vietnam. We did it after the Bay of Pigs. It's what we do as Americans, and we should, we should honor our promises. This is America's promise. Let's keep it.
Thank you. We're going to take another question from one of our participants, Babette D'Amours. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Babette, you are not muted. Go ahead and ask your question.
Good evening. My husband and I are extremely interested in changing to fully electric vehicles. The problem we have is that we are renters, and that most apartment complexes that we've lived in or visited do not have charging stations. How can we get this solved?
Babette, I have an idea. Not sure I have an answer. I would like to get back to you about this. We've passed two bills this year. The bipartisan infrastructure bill had $55 billion for charging. And there's incentives in the Inflation Reduction Act for climate action. What I'd like to do is to see whether there's help we can get for folks around here. I wish I knew that answer off the top of my head, but I think there's resources out there to make these charges available. And I think landlords would be well advised to do that, because it's going to make their places a lot more attractive. So let's see what we can do to get the word out to the apartment associations out here that money's available for that. And I appreciate the question. If you leave us, Marianne, there's some way for us to get back to Babette when we find out. We'll do that.
Yes, thank you, Babette. I think that we have your email address and contact information from the registration. And I've got a member of my staff who just took down your question and your name, and we will get more information to you. I'm going to go to another hand raised here in the chat, Benjamin Gelbert. Daniela, can you bring Benjamin over and unmute him?
Hey everyone, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? I'm just up the street from the San Diego Jewish Academy, and I want to thank you so much, Scott Peters, for supporting the MASA Act. I really, really appreciate it as a Jewish American who sadly is targeted by the Islamic Republic of Iran, being that I am an activist. I volunteer at the Holocaust Museum at the Grove in Los Angeles. And, you know, it's been a huge effort for us in the Jewish community to stress that we stand with the Iranian community as well to fight against this terrorist regime that is really making life hard for us. And I want to mention how hard it has been for me personally. There's a resolution called HRS 100 that I know some people are supporting, but it comes from Miriam Rajavi, who was once designated as a terrorist by this government bipartisanly, Mujahideen al-Haq, or MEK. I've been attacked by them 3 times. I wish I could show my video because I have a police report from the West LA PD in my hands. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because we love the bipartisan support we're getting for the MASA Act, but the Iranian community at large, we don't support Miriam Rajavi and this terrorist organization called MEK, which killed United States service members and is still actively hunting people here in the United States. So I just, I want to stress that that the Resolution 100 is not here to support Iranians. It's actually there to strengthen the Islamic Republic and their proxies abroad, in my humble opinion. But regardless, I want to thank you so much, Scott, for supporting the MASA Act.
Benjamin, I really appreciate the comment and the question. I will say I was just with the Iranian Professional Association last night and had this conversation. First of all, for people who don't know, Mahsa Amini was a woman who was walking with her parents and was taken and ultimately killed because she was not wearing her headdress correctly, walking with her parents. And so this, the MASA Act would, which I'm a co-sponsor, would levy new sanctions on Iranian leadership.
We very much.
And I firmly support the Iranian people's right to peacefully protest, defend themselves against a violent crackdown. There again, you're seeing people fight heroically for freedom, and something we can take too easily for granted. On the MEK, I would just say I was surprised to hear this comment last night, because I don't believe that the resolution does that. It's certainly not my intention to support MEK. I believe it refers to attacks on people, which might have included some of those people, but it really condemns the regime. And like we're all after a new secular regime for Iran. I don't think it does that. I think there's been some confusion about the whereas clauses, but I promised the Iranian community I would take another look at it last night, and I will do that, make sure that we're on the right track. It also is not law. I think there's been some misinformation about that. It's not law today. So I appreciate very much the question, and I think it's an important one. Thank you.
Scott, you might recall that I tried to bring Samir Nuhali over a couple of times, so we did get his question. He did type it to us, and his question is, please highlight your efforts to work with moderate Republicans.
Well, thanks for hanging in there, Samir. Look, I have to say I'm a proud Democrat. I am a civil rights Democrat, and on things like reproductive freedom, LGBT rights, how we treat immigrants, civil rights issues, there's not a lot of compromise. You just have to win those fights. And like we just took a a big loss this year on reproductive freedom. We're gonna have to fight that fight. So those are, that's really where you have a difference of opinion. You can't always bridge, but I think that on business, I would say business problems have bipartisan solutions, and there's things we can work together on, like saving the sequoias. I mean, no one wants to see the sequoias trashed. We want to look at wildfire. Are we managing the forest right? Are there ways that we can prevent wildfires from being so catastrophic and get them back to being natural again? Are there ways we can protect Social Security and Medicare and balance the budget in a way that will provide sustainability and our continued influence in the world? What's the right way to deal with Ukraine? All these things are I think we're called on to work with everybody in Congress. And I don't choose who Lubbock, Texas sends me to represent them in Congress. I have to work with that person that they send me. And it happens that there's a lot of folks over there who I may disagree with on a lot of issues, but I may agree with on this issue or that issue, and are people of goodwill. So I look for those opportunities. I'm really proud of having done that. I passed a bill with a guy named Rodney Davis, a Republican from Illinois. I think it's the only student loan debt relief bill that's passed since I've been in, which will allow employers to help you repay your student loans without it being taxable income to the employee. And I think, stuff like that, there's things we can work together on. And most legislation, I think, ends up being bipartisan. I'll continue to work on the big things like climate and immigration and try to find support. Those are politically more difficult for Republicans, I think, sometimes. But one of the things about Congress that I enjoy is like getting to know people and hearing their perspectives and trying to bridge those gaps. So I'll continue to do that. That's what I think is interesting about it, and I think that's why people send me to Congress. And by the way, the question, as the question implies, by the way, there's some you can't work with. There's some people that you see on TV and you think, wow, how could you work with that person? That's right. That's why that person's on TV. It's often like the people that you can work with who don't get on TV, who aren't looking to be Instagram celebrities, but you never hear about them. And that's most of us, I think.
Scott, talking about some of your bipartisan work and working with Republicans that you are able to work with on serious policy matters. Another question that came in advance that I think we should tackle is debt and deficit. What are you doing to reduce the federal deficit, to bring the federal government's budget more under control?
Right. So, well, the immediate issue is the debt ceiling. The debt ceiling is like the credit card bill. We've racked up a certain amount of spending. You have to pay your bills. If you don't pay your bills, that ruins your credit. And that's true for our country as well. So I want to say right off the bat, we need to, without condition, raise the debt ceiling. I agree with President Biden on that. Now, it may be that we have to negotiate because I think too many Republicans feel like that's not the case. So there's sort of a three-part framework that we're talking about now, which is what do you do about the debt ceiling? How do you defuse the bomb, if you will? Second is what spending authority do we want to provide now? What sort of limits do we want to provide now? What Republicans ask for? And that will be difficult because some of them want draconian cuts in non-defense programs that we can't sustain. But maybe we could come up with spending caps that we could live within. And I think that makes sense in the short run. And in the long run, what do we do about making sure that Medicare and Social Security and other trust funds like the Highway Trust Fund are sustainable and are able to continue on? So all those discussions are happening now in a various number of forums, one of which is the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is a bipartisan caucus of Republicans and Democrats, where I'm a co-chair of the Debt and Deficit Committee. I've been working for 3 years with Republicans and Democrats on thinking about our long-term fiscal sustainability and sort of getting the growth of the economy to be bigger than the growth of the debt. And I think it's a real serious problem now because interest costs are going to soon eclipse, within the next number of years, defense is the biggest expense we have. And that's not a good use of taxpayer money. So we shouldn't be borrowing to pay expenses. And I think, frankly, tax policy's got to be part of it, and a realistic approach to budgeting. We have to really get our act together. So we're in those conversations. I think you know, the Simpson Bowles Commission that was 10 years ago or something like that. We might want a commission to help us deal with the things we can't say out loud. But, you know, I think Republicans, for instance, don't want to talk about revenues. And I think that's got to be part of the issue as well. Does that answer the question, Marianne?
I think it does. I think it does. Thank you. We're running short on time. I'm going to take one more question from the chat, and then we're going to wrap up. And I'm going to give folks an email address to send us any questions that we didn't get to. And I also wanted to let people know that I did prioritize mostly people who are in the district. There's a lot of people on here who are not from inside our district, and I did try and prioritize those people that are in our congressional district first. So next we're going to go to Dana Marie Thomas. Daniela, if you could bring Dana over and unmute her, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
I can.
We sure can.
It is good to meet you, Mr. Peters. I am a big supporter of yours. I was rooting for you when you learned how to use Periscope. Which I love.
That's right.
And I bragged about you all over the country. That's my congressman.
That's
Okay,
cool.
we're
Thank you.
gonna wrap right there.
Yeah.
Just kidding. Go
Well,
ahead.
So my question is this. A little similar to the couple that asked about the electric vehicles.
Mhm.
Our county, Sandag, I think specifically, is looking at a proposal for a mileage tax
Right.
per mile. And they're pretty much saying everybody. That means that those of us, because I own a hybrid.
Right.
And I'm not a fan of Tesla, so I wasn't gonna, I can't put that in my house yet, and I was concerned about range and that kind of thing. My question is, are we looking at a national program that addresses this? Because I understand the state is losing a lot of revenue because they don't have the gas tax, and we've got the highest gas in the nation, and our gas is still high.
Right. So the challenge is this. So actually, one of my cars is electric, and that means I don't pay any gas tax. And so I don't pay anything for the maintenance of roads and construction of roads to the state. And so there's a gap there. And so the idea that Sandag was tossing around, which I think they have abandoned, by the way, is to impose a vehicle miles traveled for everybody. Now, I assume that would mean you'd repeal the gas tax, that you would do it instead of the gas tax. I don't know, because that was something that Sandag was talking about. But that got a lot of blowback, and I think people have withdrawn from that. But it doesn't take away the problem of the freeloading that my electric car is doing on the roads. So I don't think it's an issue that goes away. I would like to see if they consider something like that, or like a tax on your annual registration or something like that, that you get rid of the gas tax and not double tax. That's one thing I would say. But I know that they're struggling with the issue that by 2035, California said you can only sell new cars that are electric, and then it's going to become a real problem for them. So I'm interested in I think this is something that's going to have to be resolved at the governor's level, since these gas taxes are state taxes. And ultimately, the federal government's either going to have to decide to do something different or do without the revenue. But I would think that the idea is not to raise people's taxes, but to substitute one tax with another. That discussion has not even come up at the federal level. So I'm not sure how the Transportation Committee wants to address that, but that's the issue at the state level. And I think they've punted that. They've decided not to take that up now, but it's an issue that's going to become more challenging for them as more people convert to electric and use less gas, right?
Thank you, Scott. We got to just about everybody, and I see that we have a couple of hands that are raised, but I recognize the questions from the ones that were submitted in advance, and I think we covered all of them, all of those topics. We are out of time. If you did not get your question answered and we weren't able to get to you, you can send us an email at scott.peters@mail.house, mail.house.gov, and we will get back to you as soon as we can. You can also go to our website and sign up for our e-newsletter, so you can get more regular information from us. The website, if you go to the website and sign up for our newsletter, the website is scottpeters.house.gov. Scott, did you have any other closing remarks?
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for attending. First of all, we like the virtual format because it allows more accessibility for people. We don't have to get a place and have the police monitor it and use taxpayer money for it. So we're going to try to do these more often. And I hope you found it useful. Like I said, if we didn't get your question, you email it to us, we will answer it, like Marianne said. And obviously you can go to the website and keep up with us. If you'd like to get our newsletter, we send out a newsletter periodically to let you know what we're up to, particularly if you're new to me and I'm new to your area. You can sign up for that on the website as well, and we'll try to keep you posted on what we're up to. And as always, if you think we're doing something wrong, do me a favor, don't yell at the TV. Let me know. I'm so proud to represent San Diego, and I think a lot of the best ideas about what the country should do and what I should do to represent this area come from you all. So let us know. Don't yell at the staff, but let the staff know respectfully that you disagree or that you've got an idea for me. I really welcome that. And it's an honor to represent you in the United States Congress. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.